Welcome to Ride the Stream, where we discuss old and new television series and film streaming on our favorite platforms. I'm Michelle, co-host, and I'm here with Travis, also co-host. And welcome to our next installment of our discussion about the television series Lost. We are on season 1, episode 14, entitled Special, originally broadcast on January 19th, 2005. Travis, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty good. This is a snow day here in Baltimore. So Megan and the kids have the day off from school. Potentially a day off tomorrow. We'll see. So there've been a lot of kids coming and going inside the house because they've been playing in the snow for hours. So I think they're inside for right now. But yeah, it's been a good day.
Oh, cool. And of course, I am joining from Glendale, Arizona. So we have another wonderful sunny day, a little on the cool side. We're at 55. Still waiting for some winter rain to arrive. So we're not going to dry up during the summer like we do every year. But it's a good day. Otherwise, I'm joined by Algernon in the back. Uh, that is Sam in front. And then I've also got Cecily down here off screen. She is always my vidcast partner and podcast partner. So I'm not alone here. You probably see another cat or two come through at some point during the podcast during our episode.
Yeah,
So,
gotta love the cats.
oh yeah, got 8 of them to choose from. I think I've got just about every color represented. So we've got black, we've got white, we've got orange, we've got gray, we've got tabby, we've got tortoiseshell, calico. So I think we've got it all. No Siamese though.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so we are here. We are on episode 14 of Lost. And
What an episode.
what an episode indeed. This episode focused on Michael and Walt. So we get a bit more of their story because we don't know too much about them other than the fact that Michael's the dad, Walt is the son. And Walt does have a dog named Vincent. So just want to clarify that just in case we throw in the name Vincent every once in a while, because Vincent doesn't appear on screen a whole lot. So just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. That is a dog.
Yes.
That is a dog. Well, I think I'll go ahead and if you're good with it, Travis, I'll go ahead and work on going through our synopsis. And then we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. Work for you?
Yeah. Good.
Okay, cool. So, Michael and Walt are struggling with their relationship, and through several flashbacks, we learn that Michael was not in Walt's life up until a few weeks ago. Michael and Susan, the mother of Walt, had not married. So when Susan had a great career opportunity, she took it and Walt with her. She married and moved around a lot for her job. And even though Michael wrote to Walt over the years, Susan never shared his correspondence with Walt. So when Susan passed away, um, and Michael went to pick up Walt, who was now living in Australia, Walt had absolutely no idea who Michael was. How crushing.
Yeah.
Um, but it also explains a lot of their relationship on the island. So, turning to the present day on the island, there are several storylines that we're privy to as the audience. Walt and Vincent the dog, are missing. The first time, Michael finds Walt with Locke, who is teaching him to throw a knife at a target. Michael is very pissed off and has a lot of words with Locke about it, which I immediately thought, well, that's dangerous. I don't think you want Locke on your bad side, but okay. The second time that Walt goes missing, Michael asks around and thinks that Walt has again ignored him about staying away from Locke. Michael does find Walt and Boone. They're out in the jungle doing whatever they're doing. And Michael has words with him and says, "Where's Walt?" To which Locke is like, he's not here. Locke has actually gone, has actually respected Michael's wishes and has stayed away from Walt. But when Locke understands that Walt and Vincent are missing, he puts aside and says, "Let's go find your boy." So they do work together to find Walt, and eventually they do. But they do have to do a rescue because Walt has been trapped by a polar bear and a big
Second
polar
polar
bear.
bear of the season.
Yes, yes. So Michael and Locke's relationship does actually improve, as does Michael and Walt's. And in the evening, at the end of the episode, Michael shares a box containing all of his correspondence that he had sent to Walt. Walt is trying to understand why he never saw them, but it's a young boy, so he's kind of like immediately starts digging into the box. They share experiences and impressions. A joke that we see at the beginning of the episode, Walt finally gets to read, and he thought it was dumb, just like Michael thought it would be a dumb joke, but nonetheless, they start to bond, and it really is sweet to see that. A couple other storylines that are going on. Charlie cannot find Claire's bags. Eventually, he runs into Kate, who had actually moved Claire's things back to the beach because that's where Claire was headed. Charlie, after an altercation with Sawyer to secure Claire's diary, returns Claire's things back to the cave. Charlie and Kate talk for a little bit, and Kate knows that Claire's things are in a good place until she returns. Charlie, in a really humorous little short montage, struggles with the temptation to read her diary. And by the end of the episode, he is reading her diary and learns a couple of very important things. First, she likes Charlie. Yay.
Yay.
But second, she notes in a dream that she could not escape from a black rock. Charlie remembers the comment about a black rock from Saeed. So he immediately goes and hunts down Jack and talks with both him and Saeed about Claire's dream. Jack kind of like, hey, dude, it's just a dream. There's probably really nothing to it. But Saeed, doesn't just kind of like poo-poo him. He's like, yeah, actually, Danielle had it on her map. And I did do kind of a special fold. It created a triangle. Maybe that's where this black rock is, and maybe that's where Claire is. So, Saeed is really like kind of like catching hold of this because early in the episode, he's talking about like maybe we should try to go find this black rock. We should still continue to try to get off the island. And so, that kind of storyline is continuing. We don't get a whole lot of it because, like I said at the beginning, it really is Michael and Walt's episode. I would say the third kind of storyline that we get is that there is a crisis on the island, almost as monumental as Claire's disappearance and Walt's disappearance. And that is they're running out of deodorant. And Hurley asks if anyone wants to participate in another golf tournament to divvy out the last of the deodorant sticks. And because all the sorts of things that are going on the island, he has no takers. So I guess he actually got all the deodorant sticks. I'm not sure. Hurley went for them all himself. That's a Sawyer move.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of the overarching of the episode. But I did want to make mention of a couple of notes, special notes. One being that I noticed that Walt is looking at a Spanish DC comic about the Flash and Green Lantern. And I did take a look at that, and apparently their relationship is explored through by jumping through different points of time, and then kind of exploring their relationships at these different points. Pages in the comic that Walt looks at um, before Michael takes it away from him includes images of a laboratory, a purple alien, a ship or an isolated island, and a huge polar bear. So we do learn in a flashback that Brian, Susan's husband, tells Michael after Susan has passed that Walt is different and that certain things seem to happen when Walt is around. And in one of the flashbacks, we actually see that a bird hits a window pane and dies. And Brian connects that to Walt because Walt is like asking them to look at what he's looking at, and Brian and Susan are talking about her health. And so they're ignoring him. And so this bird crashes at the window and that breaks everything up, and everybody focuses in on the bird and the sound. The second thing is that Michael is very motivated to get off the island. In a conversation with Soon, he tells her that he doesn't want Walt to grow up on the island. And so he is going to make it a one-man mission if he has to gather the various scrap metals and resources on the island, start going through them because he wants to build a raft and get off the island. So again, we see that they sort of come together, but they are still very fragmented group of people. So anyway, there's my plot synopsis. That took a lot, honestly, because there was so much. I mean, this was another episode where there were so many flashbacks. And
Yeah.
even the pacing of some of the flashbacks where we were interestingly done. Like we find out about um, Walt being kind of special versus Walt in the forest with Vincent and the dog barking and getting away. The fact that there's something in the jungle, all is paced with some of the flashbacks, which I thought was very interesting, a great way to build tension um, into the episode this time.
Yeah.
So, what were your first impressions, Travis, as the veteran of the group? What did you think of the episode? Did you remember much of it, or was it kind of new for you again?
Um, like many of the episodes, I don't remember a good portion of what takes place. Kind of remember like the some of the main bits of an episode, but there's so much that they put in each episode. I was really taken aback by this episode simply by I didn't remember how disjointed Michael's relationship with Susan was. Um, I don't know if it's because maybe when I was watching the series for the first time, maybe because I wasn't a parent, it wasn't as, interesting to me at that point in my life. I don't know. With Walt being 10, my son Marshall is 10, maybe that has more of an impact now. Um, but I don't remember feeling so like heartbroken for Michael. Like I guess he's sitting with Michael, maybe he's a year old, and you can tell he loves just that moment in time, and he seems happy. And then that Susan brings up that, she's got a job opportunity, and oh, what? She's already taken it without even like, so something happened between them to where she has no interest in Michael anymore. And even in the first scene together where they're looking for a crib, like I don't know if it seems like she's that interested at that time either. Because the comments
Hmm.
like where he's joking about like, wanting, well, he wants to, their son to be named Walt after his Michael's dad. And then she makes the comment, well, if his last name can be hers, and it's like, well, if you want your son to be named Walt, you know, and Michael, you can see him pausing there for a second, like with that comment, like, well, that's kind of, eh, whether it's like a light-hearted jest or not, I don't know, but their relationship seemed, volatile is not the right word, but they didn't seem to mesh from the beginning.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Like at first, they're shopping for a crib. Michael finds the perfect crib. It's going to cost 3 months' salary.
Ah,
That's what an engagement ring used to cost. It's 3 months' salary, I think. But um, no, just initially you're thinking, oh, this is so sweet. They're out shopping for a crib. And then the whole thing with the names comes up, like you said. Even to the point where, like, he says, well, when we're married, the last name will be this. And you're right, there was that pause there. And just the whole thing, like, I don't know that this is do they have what it takes to go the distance? The fact that, she's pregnant and they're not married, and I'm not trying to be traditionalist here, but I do kind of think like, well, in this day and age, people don't necessarily get married when, there's a pregnancy. We saw that with Claire in her flashback that, they tried to make it work and it didn't work out. You know, the father got cold feet and abandoned them. But here, they did stick together, but you can tell I mean, you can kind of sense that there's a distance between where their thoughts are. I mean, it's already showing through. The cracks are already there. It's just a
yeah,
matter of time before things are not going to work out. She also makes the comment, they're also talking about money. And the fact that he's been working as an artist. It's not bringing home enough money, so he's going to go back to construction work. So that way he can make more money to support them while she goes through law school.
yeah,
Um, and then once she's the breadwinner, then he says he'll go back to being an artist again. Except that it doesn't seem like that really pans out. And when they're talking about that, I always kind of feel like I'm sure a lot of people make it work out, when they do that way. But television, I think media has been notorious about always showing that as a way of breaking couples up is because of the economic disparity between the two people.
Mhm.
And this is really no different from, other shows and movies that kind of show that as an element that ends up creating a breakup.
Yeah. And I think something that I took away from this episode, from the beginning, it seems like Michael's all for being a dad. He wants to be a dad. He wants to be in Walt's life, but it doesn't seem like Susan wants Michael to be in Walt's life. Like it's almost like as soon as she decides she doesn't want to be with Michael, and I think when she takes the job to go to Europe, I think it's Amsterdam is the first location.
Yeah.
Um, you almost get the sense like that's it. Like there is no them anymore.
Mm-mm.
Um, and Michael even says, "Hey, we can do couples counseling. We can make this work." But she doesn't want to. And throughout the course of the episode with the flashbacks, I almost question whether or not she wanted to be a mom in the first place. Um, we definitely understand that Brian had no interest in being a dad, even though he adopted her, but we find out that he only did that because that's what Susan wanted.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting reveal. Uh,
yeah,
I was kind of shocked when Brian showed up at Michael's door to let him know that Susan had some sort of rare blood disorder. Um, she was like a little bit sick and then she went fast, apparently.
yeah, a week.
Yeah, a week. Um, and of course, Michael's concern for his son hasn't wavered because the first thing he's like, "Well, Brian, what are you doing here? Where's Walt?" "Oh, well, he's at home with the nanny." And
Yeah,
and it's like Michael's like, "What the heck, dude? Why did you leave him alone?"
yeah,
So Michael hasn't wavered on wanting to be a dad, and we do, subsequently learn that he's written letters and done drawings and postcards and things like that to Walt over the years that Susan's never given to Walt.
oh,
Um, which, if Brian's adopted him legally, then, Walt is growing up with the belief that Brian's his dad. I mean, I
yeah,
don't know, but the fact is he knows nothing about Michael, and Susan has never shared anything about Michael.
oh,
Um,
that's crushing.
yeah, I do think that it goes to show that even though we haven't seen like necessarily the best side of Michael, we've seen a lot of growing pains with Michael trying to be a good dad.
Yeah,
Uh, it's it has been stressful watching him try to be a dad. And where am I going with that? Oh, the fact that through all the pain and through, finding out that Brian really didn't want Walt and just signed the papers so that he could marry Susan, Walt was the bigger man at the end. And I was like, good. Instead of showing, well, Brian didn't want you. That's why I'm here. Michael's like, Brian's gonna stay in contact with you. He's gonna write you, he'll call you, he'll try and come and visit, when he
yeah,
can. Knowing full well Brian doesn't want anything to do with Walt. And instead of hurting Walt with that knowledge, um, he chose to take the higher road. And I applaud that writing style, taking that story to show that people can be good in spite of the bad stuff that's spoon to you, what
And he
gets
does that with when he finally gives Walt the letters, and Walt asks, I never saw these. Like, why didn't my mom give me these? And like Michael could have taken that as an opportunity, like, hey, she kept me out of your life and all this other stuff. He said, it's like he just says, I don't know. But she kept them, which
yeah,
means something. So he's again, like you said, he's trying to like take the high road and not use that as like ammunition to go against Susan or Brian. He's just trying to like
yeah,
make sure his kid isn't hurt.
yeah.
And you're
I
totally right. I appreciate them giving the writers having Michael approach it that way.
yeah,
It's much more meaningful.
yeah. I do like the little subtlety about Vincent the dog, though.
Oh yeah. That
Um,
was so great.
the fact that Michael does get his dig, but it's for us, the audience, to kind of pick up on and not necessarily for Walt to even, know. But the fact is that Vincent was Brian's dog, and there was probably no arrangement for Vincent to leave the household and go with Walt, but Michael felt that Walt was attached to the dog, which we see in one flashback when he's just like mesmerized by Vincent, and the way Vincent is just, kind of guarding him and right next to him and stuff. There's obvious an attachment. So I like that
Yeah,
Michael, understood, recognized that attachment, and was like, oh no, Brian said that Vincent's going with you.
that was great. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so I feel like this episode, like you said, the first all we've seen with Michael, it's and in this episode, Hurley points out, man, he must really hate being a dad because he's essentially a new dad. Like he's trying to like take care of his kid. He doesn't want him lost on this mysterious island with the unknown monster all over, not knowing when it's going to pop up. So yeah, he's probably scared, and
Yeah.
that leads to him like maybe lashing out, but like, hey, can you listen to me and stay where I asked you to stay? I don't think he should have thrown the comic in the fire. But
No.
I think this episode amplifies how much Michael wanted to be in Walt's life. And the
Yeah.
fact that he was, you know, shut out. I mean, she literally took him to a different continent, which
On multiple
basically,
multiple times.
and then basically, like, I don't know what Michael is supposed to do in that situation. So, kind of like, as a viewer, I just felt like helpless. Like, I don't know what he could have done differently. And
Yeah.
I mean, unless he had the financial means to hire an attorney, Susan pointed out that to him, like, hey, I make more money than you, you know, I have a steady job, I'm the mother. Who do you think a judge is going to side with?
Yeah, and even though, he's the biological dad, they weren't married. I think that has changed quite a bit now with regards to if couples are not married. I think there's more, a try to give them, joint custody and things like that. But, we're talking 20 years ago, and the social mores around family and divorce and, what is the best course for the child, and it is typically, that the child should be with the mother. And in this particular case, she's the breadwinner. She makes more money than him. Um, yeah, it hurt, especially when Michael, I don't know how it was for you, but I know that when Michael yells at Walt to work with him and not hang out with Locke, um, and the fact that Walt comes back and is pretty hurtful with what he says.
Yeah.
You know, they both said things that they shouldn't have said. Um, and it's in the heat of the moment. But yeah, that was pretty tense too. I felt like I shouldn't be here. This is such an intimate thing. This is
Yeah.
an intimate moment between a father and a son, and this huge blow up argument. And you see Shannon, and you see Son and John and Hurley and others, and they all hear this, and there's no privacy,
Yeah.
to work this out. And all these growing pains are being witnessed by everybody else, plus the millions of audience viewers of the time and now us,
Yeah.
20 years later. But yeah, that that was hard, and but I was also thinking Walt as a 10-year-old had a lot of gumption to say what he said. Because I know when I was 10, I was not speaking that way to my parents, but I also didn't have the kind of dynamics that was going on um for Walt and Michael. But that was hard to see.
Yeah. No.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think the one moment that really made me question everything about Susan's character was when Michael learns that he's gonna like Brian is gonna marry her and and he's on the phone with her and he's like, no, 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 this ain't right. Just can't like willy-nilly me out of his life.
Mhm.
And he gets in a car accident, so he's in the hospital and she comes to visit him. And it's all a ruse, like she's gonna pay his hospital bills, but that's just to try to butter Michael up and say, hey, Brian wants to adopt Walt. And I wrote down what she said. Um, and it just amplified this feeling from the beginning that she just didn't want Michael in her life or Walt's. And she tells him, consider what's best for Walt. You can keep holding on if you want, but ask yourself, why are you doing that? Is it really for him? Is it for you? And then in exclamation in all caps, I say WTF. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? He wants to be in his son's life. Like, how he's not trying to be selfish. Like, he just wants to be involved. And the fact that she says that, it's so callous, and I can't even like understand like the mentality of like she must really just despise Michael for some reason or some underlying thing that we haven't seen, but I just don't understand that mindset where she's just like making Michael the bad guy for wanting to be involved in Walt's life. And I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't either, but I also think that whatever all the problems that they had, the fact that she's moved on and she probably is wanting to sever ties with her past, because we do see them as kind of a modest couple living in New York. And now, even with her attire that we see in the first flashback to what she's wearing, you know, uh, in subsequent flashbacks where she's actually visible, she has become a very sophisticated looking modern woman. And all I can figure is that maybe in order to have the best chance of a marriage with Brian, who she cares about, maybe not having a lot of ties to the past, even though Michael wants to be in Walt's life, that does complicate things. So maybe might be the case is it might just be simply for that. Um, I just, like you though, the fact that she's moving around a lot, they could have afforded to send Walt to visit Michael, and maybe spend a summer with him and then go back to the mom and Brian during the rest of the year. Uh,
Yeah.
so I do kind of feel like it could have worked. Obviously, Michael really wanted to be in Walt's life to the point where, like, he really wanted to keep Walt. It's like, Susan, you go off and do your thing. Walt can stay here.
Yeah.
She's like, no, no, no. So I almost, when you're reading that passage, that could easily turn and say, Susan, what are you doing? What is it that you really want and what's really best for Walt? Because now we know, you know, Walt hasn't said, I love my mom, or, it's my mom died. And maybe that's just his way of coming to terms with things. But, you know, um, when he even asked Michael, where's Brian? He's not like, where's dad? So, I mean, he does understand that there's a bio dad somewhere. So, it's just, it could have been a lot different, where they all could have made it work. But,
Yeah.
take that away, and it's like, why did you take that away from Walt? You know, uh,
Yeah.
why don't you answer those questions that you put to Michael? Because she wasn't willing to let go of him, but why are you holding so tight when maybe you not Walt not being with somebody who's moving around a lot in their job might have created a more, um, you know, home that isn't disrupted all the time.
Yeah. And I I appreciate, so we know that Locke has a what's the best way to put this? He has a very aggressive style of teaching, you know, with Charlie leaving them in the jungle to be bait, knocking out Boone and tying him up to see a vision while he's being drugged.
Yeah.
Um, and that's like the uh-oh type of feeling you have with Locke. But I still so much enjoy his character because he doesn't, you know, mince words with Walt. You pointed out, I think, in one of the earlier episodes, how he was just straightforward with Walt, saying, "You're having a bad month," or
Mm-hmm.
like, because he understands and in this episode he tells Michael, he's treating him like an adult and not trying to be, you know, light with him. He wants to help him take care of himself if he ever finds himself in a sticky situation by teaching him how to use a knife. And I totally understand Michael's perspective though. Like, and perhaps Michael, because I know Locke says, "Hey, I'm treating him like an adult, you're treating him like a child."
Mm-hmm.
And Michael points out at some point, like, I've already missed his childhood. I don't want to treat him like an adult, is probably what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if he felt or feels threatened by Locke being a father-like figure when Michael's supposed to be the father. Um, I don't think Locke is trying to approach it in that way, but he tries to like respect his wishes. Um,
He does. Yeah.
and the fact that like when he was trying to tell Walt, like, "Hey, you can't come around me anymore," but Michael catches him there and basically tells him, "I will kill you if you go near my son again." And it's like, ooh, ah, there, there's no coming back from those words. That's a
Mm-mm.
big deal. And the fact
Yeah.
that Locke is willing to still go find Walt And I think he understands that Michael is trying to find his way. And I think Locke is doing his best to say, hey, I'm trying to like obey your wishes. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
step on your toes. Like if you need me to stay away, I'll stay away. But when he recognizes that Michael is in distress and that Walt's lost, he doesn't hesitate, says, "Let's go find your boy."
Yeah.
And that scene where they come up on the polar bear and Walt's like hidden in these like tree brush, similar to the way, you know, Shannon and Boone
Yeah.
were like in the previous episode and Kate in the first episode, like this
Yep.
thicket of thin trees is like a protective barrier against the unknown or polar bear. Um, and when they first come up on the bear and Locke pulls Michael back, covers his mouth to tell him to be quiet, and then they climb up and crawl. When Michael slips and Locke so effortlessly quickly turns and just grabs his forearm to prevent him from falling, it's such a simple thing, but it just highlights how aware and skilled Locke is at
Hmm.
almost anything, it seems like.
Yeah.
Um, and that's I watched that scene multiple times over. I don't know why, but it's just such an impactful scene, and that Locke tosses Michael the knife so he can be the one to drop it down. Because I want to say Michael says, I thought he had said toss Walt the knife. I thought
No,
I could be
yeah,
wrong.
I watched that this morning and no, Michael actually asked um Locke to toss him the knife and then
Okay.
because he's further along in the branches and is kind of above Walt, and then he tosses it down so that it sticks in the ground. Walt picks it up and Michael tells him to, poke the bear if, his paw gets close because he's trying to do this. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that was like, I don't know, is that your standout scene perchance?
Oh, I haven't picked one yet. I've got like a half a dozen scenes, but just it's almost like this scene is like the band-aid that fixes the wound between Michael and Locke. Obviously Locke's doing the right thing by helping him get his kid back, but Michael is now asking for the knife that he took away from Walt, and he's
Yeah.
giving that knife to Walt to use to protect himself. And you see Locke using some makeshift rope, branch, whatever, to pull up Walt, um, and eventually, you know, at, Michael has Walt in his arms, and Walt starts apologizing, and Michael's like, "No, it's okay. I'm just glad you're safe."
Yeah.
And Walt wonders about Vincent, and Locke's right there to say, "Hey, he came back to you once, he'll come back again." And like Michael and Locke kind of exchange glances where Michael kind of nods to him, like that's the sign of like, thank you,
Hmm.
and it's good to see a resolution like that because it's hard to see the clash with Locke and Michael. That's like,
It is.
um, because I don't think Locke has ill intentions. It's almost like that clash is the clash Michael was having with Susan, where he was angry about, Walt being kept away from him and there was nothing he could do. But now he's there. And what is he left to do? He will do anything to keep Walt safe. And ultimately, that relies on Locke.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a great full circle moment there.
Yeah,
Um, for
I would
favorite moment,
agree.
oh my gosh, I have, I don't. I'd probably want to like briefly touch on each one that I have listed before picking one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I would agree about that scene though. I really like the relationship between Locke and Walt. I feel like I think in part because of the fact that we see that Locke actually treats Walt like his equal, um, that we get to see more of a relationship there. But now hopefully with Michael and Walt finding footing in their own relationship, and that Walt can actually get to see that Michael never didn't care about Walt, that he was still
Yeah.
writing, even though he didn't get to see him, even though he didn't know if he was ever going to get to see him, he still wrote him. Um, I I'm hoping that down the road that one, that Walt and Locke can be a little more hang out together. I do like the exchange that they have in their scenes, but that also Michael and um, Locke are, back to being okay.
Yeah.
Uh, because, yeah, I would agree. I think that Locke does things because there's a motivation, there's something that he's doing to try to help the others. As it's kind of the tough love. But I think with Walt, it's he knows that he's a 10-year-old boy. He knows that there's a limit to how tough that love can be.
Yeah.
And I think he truly likes Walt and, was trying to give him or trying to be a friend to him. But like you said, I don't think he wasn't trying to be the dad figure. But while they're there, hey, let Walt learn to use a knife. So that way, in case of something where he does have to pick up a weapon, he is able to use it and defend himself. But, um, you know, for in case of an emergency, break the glass type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very glad to see them kind of mend fences because Michael did say some pretty strong words to Locke that I thought, wow, that was pretty ballsy, especially given who Locke is, and the fact that he is kind of a coiled snake waiting to attack. You
Yeah.
don't really want to poke your stick at it. So, yeah, I was really surprised, but it also makes sense that Michael doesn't want to lose Walt again, and especially to someone that's not even family, you know. And
Yeah.
the fact that, like you said, he's already lost 9 years of Walt's life, that he's never going to get back.
Yeah. You mentioned interesting scene. If you're okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
quickly highlight the ones that I
Oh,
uh
please do.
mentioned or that I
I,
wrote
I I
down.
have one, so we'll see if it pops up in your list.
Okay. I think I have, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Okay.
Oh yeah, you have
Okay.
7.
So I'm gonna go down real quick and then I'll
Okay.
pick my favorite.
Okay.
First one, listen, Michael connecting with Walt with the letters at the end.
Hmm.
Charlie and Kate talking about Claire.
Hmm.
Where Charlie says, every day she's gone, it feels like bits of me are crumbling. And that's just uh heartfelt
Yeah,
sadness
that's
right there.
actually my favorite scene. So,
Oh, is it?
hmm, yeah.
You want to go ahead and talk about that?
No, let's go down your list and then we can
Okay.
revisit. I don't want
All
us to
right.
lose sight of your 7.
Um, the third one is interesting with Walt being ignored. I know Susan is feeling ill, but her and Brian don't pay him any attention. And this makes me wonder how much of a parent do either of them want to be? Like, and so that's just striking to me that like the mom could have easily said, "Hey son, like I'm not feeling good right now. pay attention to you in a second, or Brian will pay attention to you in a second. But she doesn't even like recognize the fact that Walt's trying to ask for Brian's attention to look at the bird book. The statement about the fourth one is Brian talking about loving Susan, but not wanting to be a father, even though he adopted Walt. Um, and the comment with him noticing Walt being different, I wrote down specifically what he says sometimes when he's around, things happen.
Hmm.
And it almost makes it sound like Walt's not around that much, which makes me
Oh,
think
that's a good interpretation. Yeah.
like so maybe Brian and Susan like have their own life together and Walt's there. And something that also made me think that way when Brian leaves Walt with the nanny, my fifth scene is the nanny giving Michael the box with the
Mhm.
letters and postcards and drawings. And she says, something I think Walt should have. And it's amazing that like the nanny is recognizing the importance of Michael being in Walt's life, even though Susan never did.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, was the nanny kind of like the caregiver and not Susan or Brian?
Yeah.
Um, the sixth one is Michael meeting Walt as a grown kid and him being kind to Walt and not telling him the truth about Brian. It says a lot about Michael's character. And then the last scene is where Locke and Michael are climbing a tree and Locke grabs his arm. It's such an intense moment, and he kind of just like quickly like, whoop, don't
Yep.
fall. Like, um, so with all of that, just
Hmm.
briefly mentioning all of those, a lot of those are involving the passive parenting with Susan and Brian and not really feeling like they want to be involved.
Yeah.
So I think my favorite moment, I will lean on the first one I mentioned where Michael and Walt are finally connecting at the end of the episode over the letters, and Walt kind of realizing that Michael was sending letters and postcards and drawings and doing it over the course of like the 8 or 9 years that he wasn't around. And I think that's a big message for Walt to hear, especially when he didn't believe that Michael gave a damn like about him.
Yeah.
And seeing them connect, and again, Michael taking the high road and not trying to trash on Susan,
Yeah.
it shows that Michael always wanted to be the dad. Um, and it makes me glad that even though they are on an island together and he doesn't want Walt to grow up on the island, it makes me glad that Michael is in his life. Um, and that they can have that kind of bonding moment where they just seem happy together for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's that'll be my most interesting moment.
Yeah. I think also with that scene at the end, I felt like all that Michael had to go through to get to that point, that the relationship wasn't lost, even though it felt like, gosh, were they ever going to get on the same page? Were they ever going to be able to connect? Because, Michael, I think at the beginning of the episode talks to Walt about, oh, so you have an interest in art. And it felt like that was going to be his way in and say, well, yeah, I used to be an artist, or, I haven't drawn for quite a while, but, I drew a lot for you and sent them to you. That it was kind of a missed opportunity, or the time just wasn't right. But the fact that at the end there really is, there's the opportunity for them to still have the relationship, even though Michael had to wait, almost 10 years to have that relationship. The
Yeah.
fact is that he didn't ever give up, even though he signed the paperwork that allowed Brian to adopt Walt. Michael never did give up on wanting to be Walt's dad. And seeing them together again, around the campfire, which is just lit brilliantly by the cinematographer. Um, just so well done, and the feelings that you have, because it had been another really tough episode. And then to have that kind of nice, quiet moment where they're connecting and you're thinking, okay, they have a chance. Thank goodness they have a chance. And it also made me think about so many, broken parents out there that don't get that chance and how sad that is. And, thank goodness, Walt and Michael get to have a chance,
Yeah.
to have that relationship that they didn't get to have. And that thank goodness Michael didn't give up, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really did like that scene. Um, as I mentioned, as you were going through your list, my scene was your number two. And that is where, Charlie and Kate return Claire's bags to the cave, because, he'll be able to watch her luggage. He's secured her diary, but he hasn't read it. And Sawyer acts like he's read the diary when they confront him. But
I
in
love
fact,
that moment too. I didn't write it down, but when
yeah,
Charlie fights back and punches his injured arm to get the diary, and then like Sawyer punches him, and he said, "I look like you punch like a putz," and Sawyer's so offended by that he wants to like try to punch him again to like prove I can punch hard. And
yeah,
so I like that. Charlie's a tough son of a gun.
yep, yep.
So that's yeah, that seemed so fun.
But of course, in total Sawyer fashion, he he taunts Charlie with supposed passages, from the diary. When in fact, he does tell Kate, I never had a chance to read it. I hadn't gotten to it yet. He's probably still on Watership Down. But he didn't read the diary. Sawyer didn't read the diary. And Charlie is sitting there with her luggage, and Kate has, they have that wonderful exchange. I
Yeah.
really did love how, even though it's been a week since she's disappeared, and even though he hardly knows her, he feels like he said, parts of himself have crumbled with the passage of time. And so Kate confirms, hey, it's good that you're taking care of her stuff and keeping it safe until she does return. And I feel like, you know, I don't feel like Kate is patronizing him in the slightest. Like,
No.
I think she hopes right along with Charlie that Claire will return. And again, as we've talked in prior episodes, Kate seems totally genuine here. There's no ulterior motive. She's really truly in the present and a friend, no conniving plans behind it. And I really think that you get to see both genuine Charlie and Kate having a beautiful exchange, one that's filled with hope, um, and also frailty, at the grief that Charlie continues to have, um, of her not being present any longer. And
Yeah.
of course, I sincerely loved the montage of, Charlie trying to decide whether he'd read, he'd pick up the diary, kind of flip, but it did go all the way open, then he slam it back down on the ground to the point that he then puts it in the bag so he won't be tempted by it. And then, by the later, we see his nose firmly planted in
Yeah.
her diary. And I do kind of wonder if parents ever go through that. Like, when I was growing up, I kept a diary. My dad said that he read my diary, and I was just mortified, you
Oh
know.
wow.
Yeah. And I did kind of feel like, oh, I wonder how she's going to feel when she finds out that Charlie has actually gone through her diary. Um, but I know for me, even though it's kind of, he does get to find out that she likes him, and you find out some clues about Black Rock, but a lot more mystery around it. At, at the end, he did betray her own thoughts. He did invade
Yeah,
her own thoughts. And I do hope that she will understand. Because I know when my dad told me that, I was petrified. And it's not like it was anything really bad. I mean, I was really young, I was probably Walt's age, maybe a little bit older or something, but it's still something that should be private and respected that it's private. Um,
100%.
so I don't know if my dad really did or not. But the fact of what you find out when you know, reveal a secret that wasn't meant to necessarily be read by other people. So,
Yeah. Yeah, when we see Charlie reading, I was like, "Damn it, Charlie, come on."
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's that is, a betrayal of trust.
yeah,
Like if my kids have a journal, that's going to be their stuff. If they want to show me stuff, great. I'll be happy to be there, but I'm not gonna be nosing around their stuff and like that's just that it's just when something gives you the
yeah,
that's not good. That's not a good feeling. It's not the right thing to do. So
yeah. He
Charlie
acknowledges it.
succumbing to temptation,
Yeah,
um, you know, maybe that's just like an indication of he struggles with that
yeah.
but I yeah,
But it was cute, the whole montage of him trying to avoid
absolutely.
reading. For me, given how stressful the episode was, I really did appreciate that. And I really felt that it goes to show how Charlie is multifaceted, and how what is it, Dominic Monaghan, who
Mhm.
portrays him, just what a wonderful actor he is. And just all the nonverbal cues that he brought to that scene. So that's why it's my
And he
favorite.
also after putting it in the bag, he puts another bag on top of that bag.
Yes.
Like just and then he has to just walk away. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's such a great scene. Because you have this intimate moment where he's talking to Kate and about how he feels, to then the humorous moment alone with the bag and the diary. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate though at the end when he's talking to Jack and Saeed, and Saeed's like, "You're reading her diary." He's like, "Yes, yes, I'm scum." Like,
Yep.
he,
Yep.
like at least he recognizes that.
Yeah.
And we don't
And
even,
that's adorable even. So,
and like probably technically the biggest moment of the episode is the cliffhanger
yes, which I didn't
with,
mention. But
yeah,
we can obviously spoil that here, because it's part of the episode, and that is that the return of Claire right at the very last moments of the episode as she walks out from the evening jungle when Locke and Boone are out looking for Vincent, and
yeah,
Locke is blowing his whistle, and Boone, funny, it's like, who can hear that? And you know, I forgot what Locke said, something like, well, you can't hear everything. And then there's a rustling, and Boone says, well, I heard that.
yeah, yeah,
And then you're thinking,
um,
okay, is it going to be Vincent coming through there? Another polar bear?
yeah,
And it is Claire, and she looks confused. And I think that Boone and Locke were kind of like, whoa, you're back.
yeah.
So,
So that's, um, yeah.
oh,
Again, it's just the beauty of watching the show again. It's like I forgot about that. So seeing their eyes like widen as they realize who's coming out was
Mhm.
such a cool thing to rewatch.
Well, we've been talking for quite a while about the episode, so I would not be able to guess who you're going to pick, but who was the most interesting character from the episode in this watch through for you?
Um, there are quite a few people that you could pick from. I'm gonna say Michael,
Mhm.
just because we learn how dedicated he was to Michael or to Walt and how much of a father he wanted to be. And I think that's important to see that because it kind of helps maybe explain like how awkward or how easily frustrated he's been with Walt, because he's learning to be a dad
Mhm.
on a while being stranded on an island after a plane crash, and you know he doesn't know how to be a dad yet. He's trying. He's trying to figure it out. He's trying while also trying to like connect with him. So I getting that backstory I think was a big deal, and like and I'm blanking on the actor's name who plays Michael, but he
Yeah,
does
I
a,
don't know
a
who it is.
great job conveying all of the emotions that come with being a parent and being frustrated or, scared or whatever. It's a really complicated episode because there are a lot of feelings to untap with it. Because I can't imagine as a dad being separated from my kids like that. Like I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And so I give it to Michael this episode. What about you?
Well, I would have also said Michael, so I'll say Locke in this episode. I think definitely Michael, and I would say Locke would be the runner-up. Um, I'll put forth him for reasons that we've discussed. The fact that while he does have a very um, dangerous side, has done things that, probably most people would not do, like honking people over the head, serving them up as bait, and yada yada. Um, Locke does have integrity in there as well, in that he does respect Michael and what he's trying to do, does respect that, to give, to put space between him and Walt, even though um, he'd like to be Walt's friend and does treat him like, his equal. But Locke also realizes the fact that Michael's struggling to be a dad, and it doesn't help with Walt being enamored by Locke and what he represents on the island. So I think that we get to see a little bit different side to Locke,
Yeah.
and the fact that he could have just busted Michael's ass in this episode, and he didn't. Like Michael taking the high road with regards to Brian and what he really felt about Walt, as well as, Locke and how he can tend to deal with people. The fact that he didn't. He
Yeah.
also took the high road and said no, and backed off and tried to, you know, counsel Locke, or I'm sorry, to counsel Walt to respect his dad,
Yeah.
because Walt, was like, that's not my dad, and blah, 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 and of course, Locke is like, no, you need to respect your dad, you know.
And he says that, Michael cares a great deal about him, and that's huge.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I'll go with Locke on this one. Um, yeah, I like what Locke did, and again, we both really like the scene of Locke and Michael working together in partnership. So yeah, I'll go with Locke.
Yeah, he was up there uh for consideration too. I think Locke and Walt, um, and just I know they're small moments, but I think Charlie and Kate are up there too in this episode.
Oh yeah.
Um, and just you get to see these little tidbits like you mentioned earlier. Kate truly cares about Charlie. You get to see Charlie truly caring about Claire.
Yeah.
Um, you get to see Walt being a, isolated, frustrated 10-year-old kid and
Mhm.
trying to deal with a dad who he doesn't think's his dad. And so there's a lot of moments, but yeah, I think Locke, oh, it's how do you not love Locke? He's so good.
Harry Quinn, he's so great. I
Yeah,
just seems like this role was made for him. And I don't know if they had him in mind when they were writing the role or not, but great casting. Great casting for him. He's just perfect.
absolutely.
Just
Oh,
perfect. So we do have to talk a little bit kind of specific to this episode. And I would say, anything that goes in the show, there's always a reason why. So I obviously took special note of the Spanish DC comic and what that might be implying. Um, you know, did you remember the comic? Did that, I know, as the veteran, um, did that surprise you that it was there based on what you know through the series? Um, is there anything that you can talk about with regards to the comic without revealing too much?
I do not have a lot of recollection about the comic in the show. Um, when it comes up, we're like, oh right, Walt was enamored with the comic book, even though it was in Spanish, but he liked the pictures. Um, the image of the polar bear um, always struck me as because when the polar bear pops up later,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, is there some connection that Walt has? Because earlier in the episode, he's frustrated with Brian not paying attention to him or Susan paying attention to him while he's looking at the bird book.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bird appears right into the sliding glass window. He's frustrated with Michael when the comic book gets tossed in the fire and you see the polar bear in the flames. And a polar bear pops up. So in the back of my mind is like, is there a connection with Michael and the animals? And um, but more than that, I don't have anything specific to
Yeah.
add regarding that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking back to whether um I think the comic book had been shown some episodes back. Like I think he had a hold of it at one point, but we didn't really see what it was until this episode where we actually got to see the title. I think the title of the actual comic is um translated into The Fastest Friends. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. And of course, supposedly there's a laboratory perhaps somewhere on the island. The fact that Ethan may have like a syringe, so there's some sort of medical thing. Don't know if they've talked really about aliens, but we do see a purple alien. So I'm like waiting for that to pop up. The ship or an isolated island, which I feel like we're kind of getting, you know, hints are dropping that they're kind of, well, obviously they're isolated, they're lost, but are they isolated to a greater degree than what even we or they realize? And of course, the huge polar bear. And what I thought interesting about the polar bear when it was on the screen is the fact that it wasn't live. I mean, obviously it wasn't, right? It's like some sort of special effect that they have the bear there. but I felt like they went to the extent to make it almost look like it came out of the pages of the comic, because of the blue hinge to the blue to the fur, which would have been shadowing in the comic.
Yeah.
Um, that it seems like it's a little more outlined when it's, you know, in the jungle. So I thought it was just kind of like, yeah, is is Walt imagining things? Is he able to, for whatever reason, for a special reason, he's able to materialize and have these things appear? Because it certainly seemed real, and
Yeah.
Locke and Michael definitely saw the polar bear. So
Yeah.
that's kind of scary. Um,
And the one thing I don't remember is if he had the comic book when the first polar bear popped up and
yeah,
Sawyer shot the first polar bear. So it makes me think back,
yeah,
oh, well, was he looking at the comic book then? And did he manifest something
mm-hmm,
there too? And is he doing it? Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting um, question mark that um, moving forward, it's like, well, what else is going to happen?
yeah.
So,
And as having watched this a few times, was there things that changed for you on this watch, or something new uh in this watch through, even though it's been a few years since you watched it the last time?
I think the intensity that I felt during this watch through, I think was greater.
Hmm.
I think the the struggles that Michael has been dealing with over the great amount of years that he's been without Walt in his life, and having that amplify and outburst towards Locke and threaten his life. And I don't think that it impacted me quite the same way when I first watch it. And I think that's just me coming from a different headspace where it's like I'm trying to understand Michael's point of view as a father.
Hmm.
And I think probably when I initially watched it, I was like, dude, why are you so harsh on Locke? Like he's just trying to like, look out for Walt in a different way. And in
Yeah,
this way, it's like, I don't think Michael should have threatened to kill Locke, but I think I'm understanding more on how he's been struggling
yeah,
with everything and trying to deal with it and him trying to feel like, hey, I'm the one who's supposed to look out for him. Like, and
yeah,
I think he missed out on that to where he's wanting to be the only one to look out for him. Um, but I think that connection he has with Locke at the end, I think is maybe I hope because I can't remember. I hope it's him recognizing, oh, I there are people here that like Walt and want to help take care of him, and that's a good thing.
yeah,
So I think that's probably my biggest takeaway is that I don't think this episode impacted me quite as intensely during the first watch through. And I think that's just simply being a parent and recognizing like, oh, I have a son who's the same age, and um, I can't imagine Michael going through life without Walt in his life for so long because
yeah,
that's soul crushing.
yeah.
So
I think with my first watch through, um, I was taken aback how tense the interactions were between Michael and Walt initially, when they were just so divided. And I know there's a lot of healing they'll have to go through. But um, getting the flashbacks were so helpful in better understanding that um, Michael didn't care. that it wasn't that Michael didn't care why he wasn't in Walt's life, but a lot of other circumstances that led to them not getting to be together, or at least see each other and have interaction. And it also, I was, understanding more fully why Michael was being so reactive and kind of violent towards Locke, and Walt himself, you know, um, with regards to his father role and the fact
Yeah.
that, why he's holding so tightly, why he's being so protective. Um, Seeing those flashbacks were so helpful to have a greater understanding of where Michael's coming from, where Walt is coming from, um, and what lays ahead. Hopefully they will be able to reconcile. Um, I know that, on my first watch through, it kind of, got past me a little, uh, the scene with Michael and son, because it's nighttime. Michael's watching Walt sleep, and son is able to come over and talk to him and ask if he's okay. And I think he wants to say he's not, but he says he's okay, and he
Oh
comes,
yeah.
yeah, and he says, you know, I haven't been able to be with Walt, and I just, his his wish as a father for his son is that he not have to grow up on the island, and that's why he's so motivated to get off the island, because he doesn't want Walt to grow up in that environment. He wants him to have the chances and become an adult and not spend his entire life on some deserted island worried for dangers and all that type of stuff. And I think, Michael says that in the somewhat heat of being pissed at Locke and others, but um, yeah, that was an interesting conversation that he has with Son.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I think he says um he doesn't know how to connect with him
Mhm.
and he just wants him to know that he's on Walt's side. And it's such a great moment because I think he recognizes that he's not succeeding yet. And I
Yeah,
will admit, I don't condone like Michael's, threatening of Locke. I don't think he should have thrown the comic book into the fire because I do think, as a parent, I think that you can do things, or I think anyone in life, I think you can do things that sometimes leaves a permanent image in that other person's mind when you do something specific or say something the wrong way.
yeah,
Um, and hopefully, like the comic and fire is something that Walt can overlook. I don't think that was a good thing to do. Um, and I think that happens after he talks to Son, where he says he's just trying to. Maybe he does. I don't know. I don't know what happened first, but him saying he just wants Walt to realize he's on his side and he just wants to find a way to connect with him, I think is that's the right frame of mind to have as a parent. And being a parent for the first time, Michael is experiencing the whole gamut of emotions because he doesn't get the whole watch them grow up. He's got the 10-year-old who, you know, is able to speak his mind.
yeah,
And, you know, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you want your kid to be able to say, tell me how you feel. Try to be respectful, but
yeah,
um, so it's a lot. Um, and it's interesting to see Son come to Michael in that moment. So
yeah,
she clearly recognizes the struggles that Michael and Walt are going through.
yeah. Mhm. Another good episode. They're all good, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they really are.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to touch on that you would like to touch on?
I think we have covered all of it. I'm going through my notes real quickly. I think in the journal, Claire mentions that I think it quote says Charlie makes me feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That she likes him a lot.
yeah.
He's
Uh,
sweet.
I think we've touched on all of the major points that I had highlighted. Um, so seeing Claire come back, I'm already I already know I don't remember what happens next, so I'm already looking forward to seeing the next episode again.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm ready to see the next episode and preparing notes for it, so that way we can come back next week and have another conversation, this time for episode 15. So obviously, we'd love to invite you. Please feel free to subscribe, hit the notification bell. Definitely leave a comment in the comments box below. What was your favorite scene? What was your favorite character? What was maybe a standout, you know, uh, thing in the episode that maybe we missed, or you just want to be able to converse a bit more about? We'd be happy to have you comment. And obviously, if you have spoilers that are beyond this episode, please note right up at the top that there's a spoiler alert. You know, we are recording ahead of time, so a little pulling the curtain back. But I found I'm not the only newbie out there. One of my friends on Facebook said that they just gotten or recently gotten all the DVDs, and they hadn't watched them yet. So I'm like, oh, another newbie.
Yeah.
So there are those of us out there, and I would definitely say, if you haven't taken the plunge, definitely take the plunge, and start watching them, and then join us in our conversations weekly, as we post each episode every Friday. So if you aren't subscribing but don't want to miss, for whatever reason that you went subscribe, but we are dropping a new episode on every Friday. With that, thank you so much for joining us today in our conversation about episode 14, called Special, featuring Michael and Walt's story. So thank you so much.
See everyone next time.
Yep.